Alrighty. We are on the next episode of the Love and Leary podcast. And can I tell you, I could not be more excited. We are joined today by Christine Rincon, who runs about the coolest website and organization I have ever seen. And I can go more into that in a little bit. But I am so stoked to have you on the podcast.
Thank you so much. Oh my gosh.
So excited to have you, Christine. And I mean, honestly, I think this might be one of Marion's favorite things to talk about because even when I met her way back in the day, I thought Marion was one of the coolest with some of the work that she did back in the day at NASA. So I'm excited about this conversation because I'm going to be hearing and learning from some incredible smart people. So, Marion, what are we talking about today and what are we going to do with Christine?
Well, I'll let Christine talk about it, but she runs a website organization called the Space Nurse. And Christine, do you want to tell everybody a little bit about what that is? And I just want to say, I am specifically wearing my NASA space shuttle sweatshirt just for
Yeah.
this episode. So I'm totally geeking out here.
Thank you so much. So I founded the Space Nurse because let me go back a little bit. I have always been interested in space. I've always read sci-fi, I've watched sci-fi, like that was my thing. So I always kind of knew that that was like the trajectory that I would want to go on even before I knew I wanted to be a nurse. Fast forward to me becoming a nurse and then I'm like, you know what? Space nursing as a thing. So this was in 2015 when I became a nurse. Space nursing isn't really like a thing, but in my mind, I'm like, let me kind of like prepare my career. And then when I finally get to like the level that maybe I have a little bit more experience, then they'll get their act together and then I'll be able to like join NASA or something. So, as you know, it's now 2026 and we're not really there yet. So, a couple of things have happened in my life that I was just kind of like, you know what? I am just going to be the person because there's really nobody that's like out here advocating for nurses in that space. So I just decided I'm going to be the person to do that. And so right now, the way that NASA works, right, as far as like space missions, is that there is a flight surgeon and like a biomedical engineering team in mission control. And they're able to radio or talk to the International Space Station. So for now, that works, right? If there's an issue up there, they kind of coordinate what's going on and then they evacuate. Just kind of like what happened a few weeks ago where they had to bring the team back. And so because they're making plans to go farther and farther, right? Once we're talking about Mars, it takes 6 months to get there, right? So if we're talking about going further and further, we need medical teams that kind of mirror Earth. And so who better to take care of a person in long term, right? And we're talking about not just people trying to survive space, we're talking about people that are in space living their normal thriving. Who better to care for the whole person than the nurse? So that's kind of like the advocacy part of the Space Nurse LLC.
So, and Rebecca, I promise I'll let you get in here at some point, but like, so I am so excited, right? Like, I have loved space since I was little. My mom and dad took me and my sister to Kennedy Space Center when, I don't know, we must have been like 7 or 8. And her excitement, my mom's excitement around NASA and space has never ended. And it hasn't ended for me either. And so being able to like talk to you and see the work that you're doing as a nurse, I have always wanted to try and get a job at NASA. And to your point and some of the stuff that I've read on your website, I've never thought that I, as a nurse, had the background needed to apply for any job at NASA. And then I read that blog you put together about the different skills that nurses have and how those translate in the different ways that NASA advertises for jobs and how we can take our experience and sort of fit those into those positions. So I would love for you to talk a little bit about that and why you want to see more nurses in space travel and at NASA. I mean, you kind of already did, but how that translates.
Sure. I think to the point of the skills that we already have, it's funny because this actually came from me looking, right? So I was looking, and there's a lot of engineering terms that are in the job postings, because as somebody told me, NASA is made by engineers for engineers, right? So when I was in there, I was reading all these terms that I wasn't like I'd never heard of. And then I Googled one. So, and I'll use this one as the example of something that nurses do all the time: human in the loop processes, right? I saw that and I said, I don't know what that is. I don't do that, right? And when I looked it up, I was like, wait a minute, I do that. Like, it's literally anytime. So, for anybody watching, anytime you interact with a machine. So, let's say you are opening the Pyxis, right? And the Pyxis, you're opening the machine, and the Pyxis gives you a warning, right? That says, are you sure you want to, because this, right? And you say, you think about the patient that you have, and you're like, yep, right? Human in the loop. That's literally, the machine has a job to do, the machine has a setup, but the human is the one that is ultimately deciding what's going to happen, right? The other example that I figured with human in the loop is in our electronic medical records, we have those sepsis alerts, right? Where it will figure out based on the patient's vitals and things like that if the patient may be getting septic. So anytime a nurse looks at that and then assesses their patient and says, no, that's not sepsis, and clicks it off, right? That's a human in the loop process. So any nurse would be looking at that job posting and be like, mm-mm, and move on, when it's literally you, like you are doing this, right? So it's words like that, and then a couple of other things where, you have to be familiar with NASA standard 3001, which is literally NASA's document that explains what are the parameters that a space station needs to have for a human to be okay, right? So that is the document that says the temperature needs to be between this and this, right? The air quality needs to be this percent nitrogen and this percent oxygen, right? So that's what it is. We know that, right? You see NASA standard 3001 and you're like, I don't know what that is, right? But we do that.
Yeah, Christine, I love this. And I know, Marion, this is just like a dream come true for so many conversations. And what I'm just blown away with is how you had such a vision that this should happen, that you looked at this space, you've had a love for it, and all of a sudden you've created this roadmap that you're like, look at NASA is not ready. Like they're not ready to be there because they've left out nursing. And so here is our 10-year roadmap so that you are going to actually push nurses to be in this space. This is how NASA needs to operate. You're writing the playbook and the roadmap for success for NASA to be successful by bringing nurses into this loop, which, to your point, it's the human in the loop when it comes to tech. But is it the truth that now that we need the nurse in the loop when it's coming to NASA for the success of their future missions? I just am blown away and wanted to just give you huge kudos because
Thank you.
when Mary and I were just talking, it's like it blew my mind that you would even see this. It wouldn't have even ever been something I would have visualized. And Marion, I mean, I think we should talk a little bit because you developed and helped support the entire CPR protocol for NASA. And
Well, not for NASA. So, it was a European Space Agency group that was putting together what CPR guidelines would have to look like on the International Space Station. And so I was one of the authors on the guideline proposal white paper for the European Space Agency on what that could look like. That was like literally 6 years ago now. So that it probably has changed, but it's a good point in that one, they actually thought about including a nurse on their team with resuscitation science expertise. So in my previous life, I was a resuscitation science researcher and CPR expert. And so including nursing and that lens on their team was great, but also it just shows there's always parallels to the work you're doing and you never know where those parallels are going to intersect. Parallels intersecting doesn't work there, but you know what I mean. You never know where things are going to overlap. And the fact that I was doing resuscitation science, I had this passion for space travel and NASA and space science. I was able to use my resuscitation science background to help create guidelines for that. And now we get to talk to you about the work you're doing to help NASA understand and realize why nurses need to be in the mix in all of the work that they're doing to get people to Mars and for all these longer term space travel. It's just incredible. And to Rebecca's point, like, just love that you had the forethought to do this.
Thank you. It's literally me just being so interested in this topic because, one, to NASA's credit, NASA puts out so much free training. You have no idea. There are like workforce classes that you could do. And there was one, the NASA Le Space proposal experience, where I was like, you know what? Let me just join there because I don't know how to write a proposal. So let's learn from NASA, right? So I joined that one, and the thing that I learned about NASA from that class was that NASA is obsessed with technology. Like when I tell you that there is actually a human research roadmap that says, because NASA is very transparent. It says this is what we know and this is what we don't know. A list of the things that they don't know, broken down by like different sections of like thermodynamics and human health and all that. And so we invite you to propose technologies to fix these areas, that these gaps, and they will like they and this is why it's so exciting now, because there's a big push, as you know, doctor, with innovation of nurses, instead of just being end users, being involved in the process of creating the tech. And if they only knew, well, now, because I'm telling you how much NASA needs your tech. It's insane. They are handing out grants for techs.
Well, this sounds like a topic for the next hackathon, Marion. I love this. I mean, like, why not do Nurses in Space Hackathon? Well, Christine, actually, like, to your point, I think you're taking the bull by the horns. And, what is your next steps? Are you thinking about rewriting NASA 3001 from the lens of a nurse? Are you saying, look, at the group of nurses got together and they're going to audit this to make sure that these parameters for safe space station livability are looked at through the lens of the nurse? Like, what should nurses be doing? Like, how are you looking at it? I mean, when I hear you talk, I'm feeling like I'm meeting somebody who is very well versed, really an expert in this space. And so tell me, how are you thinking that you can insert yourself into these conversations and make it relevant? Because clearly there's not yet been asked for like a seat at the table, but it feels like there's possibly a path in here that you could start taking control of some of this narrative. What are you thinking about?
So the the triangle of the Space Nurse LLC is because this is a path that has not been blazed yet, right? I am essentially like explaining to everybody why this is important, which is fine because this is not something that we are familiar with. That's the advocacy part. Now, there is a part where once people start taking more notice, I want to consult. There are a lot of new space companies that are coming about. Obviously, the ones that we already know about, Blue Origin, SpaceX, Virgin. But there's a lot of other ones. Axiom wants to build the space station and things like that. There are grants that they are putting out that says, hey, we're building a space station, come and apply for this grant to see how you can help or whatever. So that's kind of like what I'm doing. Doctor, I am just banging my head against the wall to see if somebody will be like, hey, I think you might have some insight here.
Well, so there's a question. Have you reached out to NASA or any of these companies to say, this is what I'm doing, this is why it's important, this is why you need nurses on your team and involved in the work that you're doing going forward?
Yes, there's a lot of like networking going on my part. I
Mhm.
have everybody that I speak to is essentially saying that keep going. This is important because the kind of idea that I'm getting is for the plans that they have, they are behind in, not that they're behind in all of the medical part because they have their protocols and things like that. They are still thinking in very fit, very healthy astronaut terms, as opposed to the space tourist who doesn't know that. I have kind of like an example that will explain it. So if you have a fit astronaut, right, and you've trained them and you've like weeded out everybody, and you have like now these three like magical unicorn people, they know how to act on the International Space Station. But a space tourist, when they experience that nausea that most astronauts experience when they get to space. You guys are nurses. You know that not everybody vomits in the bag. And not only that, vomit does not drop in space, it spreads. And that is very dangerous if it touches electronics. So, and I say that to say that the space tourists need to be trained in that. And I feel like a nurse, those operational things, right? The doctor should create the programs, they do that thing. But the to make them do that and the operational part, it's too much cognitive load on one person when we have an entire group of people, the nurses, that could do that. And they're already doing that in the Air Force.
And I totally agree with you, but I also think the nurses should be the ones creating the programs as well. There needs to
Absolutely.
be more nursing oversight. Physicians and nurses come distinct skill sets, and both should be at the table creating these programs and leading them.
And you're right.
So,
There is another example that I have when I was at a conference and I was talking to a director of a program that's coming out with an extreme space program for nurses, actually. So I'm excited about that. He told me that he was talking to someone who was creating the protocols for a head tilt study. And for
Mhm.
anybody that doesn't know, that's a study, that's how they kind of simulate microgravity on Earth, because all your fluids go up to your head. So the way that they simulate is they turn the patient kind of Trendelenburg reverse. See, I don't even remember.
Yep. Yep.
And so
That
Trendelenburg, yeah. So they're talking about this study, and then he asked, "Okay, so how are they going to go to the bathroom?" And they were like, "They don't think about these things."
Christine, I love this. And I sort of was joking that maybe there needs to be a hackathon, but maybe there really does need to be a hackathon. You approach NASA and say, look, there's a lot of things that you guys are talking about. You're throwing out these problems, but the truth is the nurses at the bedside who are the ones that are dealing with basic bodily functions. They're the ones with the eating, the bathing, the feeding, the bathrooming, the toileting, the showering, the activities of daily living that are the ones that are experts in managing all of both the normal functions, but also when there's abnormal functions. And I think that's when we recognize we need nurses best, is not when things are normal, but when things are abnormal, because recognizing the difference between normal and abnormal behavior is what nurses do best,
Yep.
because often it starts with subtle changes. And the truth is, you send somebody up there and physicians can handle really late stage problems. But what about having we as nurses stop those subtle problems often in their tracks before they become major? I'm telling you, Christine, here's what I think I would do if I were you. I would message NASA and say, I have nurses that want to do a hackathon with you because you identified these 6 major issues that you guys aren't solving this for. Let us help you. Bring in a group of nurses. Let's make it happen. Like, I don't know, Marion. I know I'm throwing
Absolutely.
it out there, but like, let's be honest. Like, I just think this is my solutions for most things are like, let's just hack it. But anyway,
NASA actually, my background is human centered design, right? NASA uses human centered design in a lot of the work they do. So doing
Yes.
this type of hackathon wouldn't be foreign to them. I'm sure they do hackathons all the time, but to your point,
Yes. Yeah.
a nurse led hackathon specifically around these medical issues we've been talking about would be super cool,
I think
obviously.
that's I
I
think
would
that's
I
a
lose
mean,
great
my
idea.
mind.
obviously, we're
I would
just
lose
throwing
my
things out there.
mind, just so you know.
Especially if I say I have Rebecca Love and Marion Leary that are willing to help me with this, they're gonna be like, "Oh, okay."
Christine, you have us willing to help you all day long. Use and name drop wherever we can. That is a rising tide raises all boats, Christine. Because honestly, I have to tell you, the world is going to be made up of nurses who seize the day to claim frontiers unyet explored, and that's what you're doing. Did I ever think about space? Not in a million years. But thank God nurses like you exist. Do.
Well, and to
That's
that
awesome.
point, people don't think about nurses in these positions until somebody brings the data and says, you know what, we need to be at this table. I've seen it over and over and over again for years and years and years, as Rebecca has as well. And it's not until nurses step up and show up in these spaces that their value is then understood. So, thank you for what you're doing to bring the attention of nurses and our highly trained, highly educated, highly skilled profession to NASA and to the other
Absolutely.
agencies doing space exploration, because it's not just NASA.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. Like you said, the European Space Station. The world is endless in those opportunities.
Yeah.
So the truth is there's so much that can be done.
Absolutely.
So you have a cool webinar coming up, right?
Yes, I actually have one coming up next week. And so the what I thought about was how can I get nurses ready, to be ready for when NASA comes calling. And to me, I felt like the very first thing that you would need to learn is what microgravity does to the body. Like that's hands down what you
Mhm.
need to do. Because we
Totally.
don't even know what we take for granted until that we take gravity for granted, that things like fluids drop, until you go to
Mhm.
space and you realize, oh, fluids float, liquid turns into little balls, like things like that. So if you were to put in an IV and you're expecting a flash, it's not coming. And not only that, all the blood is in the head and chest. So you already have less blood in the periphery automatically. If you are expecting to spike a bag of fluids and hang it, that fluid is not coming down. And in fact, all the bubbles are going to be dispersed in the bag, and you're just going to have bubbles all over.
Literally, my mind is
I'm
blowing
telling
right
you.
now.
And Dr. Leary, because you did the whole CPR thing, how crazy CPR has
Yeah.
looks to like somebody that only has done Earthside CPR. I
Yeah.
saw the first time I saw a video of CPR in space, I laughed. I was like, this is all that NASA could come up with. But there's like a lot to it.
We
Like,
got to talk to Marion. It was the European one that
no.
we were supposed to look at.
I actually saw your name when I was doing research. I saw your name on that paper that you're talking about. I was like, oh, that's Dr. Leary.
We don't have to keep calling me Dr. Leary also, please.
Oh, uh, I'm Spanish, so that's what we do. We use titles
And
and
then
things.
please continue.
um, I'm gonna be like, Marion. um, but yeah, so it's just all of those things. So I think the very first step before we get into all the technical docs and things like that and changing the
Yeah.
language to engineering, we have to know the basics, which is that whatever you think is gonna happen to your body is not what's gonna happen.
And I think that's incredible, right? Like, because you're trying to give nurses who are interested in this space the foundational knowledge they need to be ready, like you said, when NASA calls or when some of these other space agency calls. And there's, a basic minimum educational requirement we're going to need to understand to be of value to these agencies. So, again, like, God, the work you're doing is so cool and so
Thank you.
needed. And I cannot wait to see where this all goes.
Thank
So
you.
I put the registration link right here. Make sure you register for the webinar.
I'm telling you, I think I'm showing up, Christine. I would never have thought what the body's going to do in this thing. And I mean, honestly, all I know about gravity on Earth is that it's getting harder as I get older. So I appreciate what gravity is going to do in
Proof.
space. So not even a topic that I would ever have ever thought about. So this is why it just blows my mind the power, the potential, and the reach that nurses are going to have to shape the world in the future. And you're carving that path. Marianne, this has been amazing.
I know, Christine. Thank you so much. Any final parting words or thoughts you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Yes, I think that the big thing that I did learn once I joined this space, I walked in with a little bit of imposter syndrome. And anybody that is walking into that space full of engineers and things like that is going to be like, I remember I would introduce myself like, oh, I'm Christine Rincon. I'm here. I'm just a nurse. I actually said that. And they were like, they actually stopped. Like the overall space community understands that nurses are needed, and they are the ones that put
Mhm.
their hands on the patients, and they're the ones that should be creating these things. It's just those good old boys that we need to convince. So for anybody,
It
just know that,
always
like,
is.
exactly. So, and for anybody, just know that you are needed, and you don't have to be afraid to walk into these rooms, because now you have me behind you, you have Dr. Leary, and you have Dr. Love behind
Yeah.
you. So,
Thank you, Christina, for joining us. Rebecca, do you want to close us out?
Yeah, so you guys, thank you to everyone who's tuned in the Love and Larry podcast. Today, meeting Christine Rincon, who is leading the Nurses in Space movement with the spacenurse.com, is a total pleasure. Keep in tune with all of us. We'll see you at the next episode with the new things and new frontiers that nurses are leading. Thanks for joining us.